Hey everybody, this is Loren Kling, host of 5 Things That Changed Your Life. Well, our season is over. We've had our interviews with our 12 guests, and what you're about to hear is a special live broadcast of our recap show recorded on September 22nd, 2016 in Glendale, California. Alan and I were joined by 4 of our guests from this previous first season, as well as a live audience, where we got to share and reflect on our experiences on the show, why Alan and I made it, what the guests got out of it, and all that other fun stuff. So sit back, relax, and listen to a recap episode of 5 Things That Changed Your Life. And yes, we will be back with a season 2 coming soon. Hey everybody, this is Loren Kling. Welcome to 5 Things That Changed Your Life. Woohoo! We are coming to you live from Glendale, California. As always, I am with my producer, Alan Ing. How's it going, Alan?
Oh, it's going great.
So
we did it. We're here.
We did it. We're here. We've done 12 episodes. We have 4 of our guests of the 12. So first off, on my left is Satine. How are you, Satine?
Hi, I'm well.
Good. Thank you for coming. And then next we have Tawana.
What's up, Loren?
How's it going? And then we have Liz.
Hey.
Hey. And then Christine.
Hi.
Hi.
Guys, you guys did a great job on the season.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We just aired your episode last week. So let me ask you, Christine, because you have been like a mentor and a guide for me for the last number of years in my career. And so I want to know, what did you think of the outcome based on what you and I talked about before when I said, I want to do something?
Well, I'm really super proud that you did it, you know? So you had the idea and you took it all the way to completion. So that's one thing. And then you completed it very successfully. I mean, this stuff is right up my alley. I would listen to this podcast no matter who was hosting it, but I think you guys did a really great job. I mean, I love 5 Things That Change Your Life. What? I want to hear it all the time.
Right.
Whatever.
You and I talked earlier today, and you said that you were the target audience.
Yeah.
So can you explain a little bit more of why you are the target audience?
I guess I'm a nosy Parker, and yeah, I'm a sucker for transformation. It's my favorite thing, listening to watching people transform and listening to how they transformed. And the thing that I really like about this podcast is, in a regular interview, you know, an interviewer might ask questions of their guest, but it's sort of their questions, and very often the guest is getting those questions spur of the moment. So if spur of the moment in an interview you asked me what was a moment that changed my life because I knew we were being recorded, I'd probably go with like the first thing that ever popped into my head. But with this podcast, we were asked to come up with them beforehand. So you're getting guests who have selected these moments, thought about these moments, and are coming prepared to really tell a story, not just of the moment, but then why it was so significant. So it's really a thoughtful interview. And for me as the listener and as a fan, like, I get a lot more out of that. It seems very personal because this guest has decided to show up and share these specific things in a thoughtful manner. So that's why I dig it.
Yeah, thank you. And what's interesting, Alan, is we really only had one person that I asked who said no the morning of the interview. I have a neighbor who's a fascinating guy. He's a film writer. He loves music. He loves black and white movies. And so I said, would you like to be on the show? I'm emailing you all the info. Didn't hear from him. On the morning of, reminded him, and he's like, wait, what is this again? And when I explained the show, he's like, I don't like to talk about myself. No, thanks. And so I had to scramble, and that's when we got our first guest, Casey, to record.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mr. Spielberg.
Yeah, well, that's what happens. So hopefully everybody who's listening now has heard the show. Christine kind of explained the concept, but what people might not know is that we actually asked our guests to write down 10 things that changed your life, just to torture you more, because I don't know how it was for you, and I'd love to hear your comments. I stopped at about 3 or 4. things that I'm like,
Cheetah.
yeah, that I'm like, okay, I can think of this, I can think of this. And I was at 4. So for me to do the other 6 was amazing because I really thought about stuff that I had no reason to.
Yeah, that was the thing that we had talked about when developing the show was, yeah, let's ask people for 10 things. Let's make it hard and let's make people stretch their thinking a little bit. Because I think it would be easy. You said come up with
Right.
3. I thought it would be easy to come up with 5.
Right.
It'd be interesting to see what we would get if we forced people to come up with an extra 5 more.
Right. So to our guests, did you have trouble coming up with 10 things, or was it easy?
Piece of cake.
Satine, why was it a piece of cake to come
Yeah.
up with your 10?
Yeah, it's a piece of cake. I have about 1.5 billion things in my head circling all the time. So I was just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the rest was piece of cake as well.
Wow.
It was easy.
Not so much. I wish it were that easy. I mean, for me, it took a while, and I was first. Of course, I procrastinated until it was, and then you sent me a reminder email, and finally I was like, "Dang it, I got to do this." But then what was also interesting was the 5 that you ended up choosing. I thought it was your evaluation of the 10 was also interesting to me because there are certain things that obviously I thought were the most important things, but then how you perceive them also influenced the way I thought about them as well. Because we were both essentially saying, yeah, these 5 in particular are
Right.
pivotal moments.
It is kind of a surprise when you're springing it on the guest.
Right.
But the guest already knows the answers to those things. So, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I would say for me, I'm kind of like your neighbor. I didn't, when I read it, I almost declined. And it was the same thing. It was like, wait, what is he asking me? So when it came down to actually writing down 10, it took a lot of thought. But I liked it. It made me sit back and go into like this retrospective or reflection of my life. And then all of these things just started to flow out. And then I kind of get what you're saying, Satine, is like after I started to sit there, then things started to bubble up to the surface.
You realize you were 20 now.
Well,
and you had to
yeah,
choose
yeah.
what 10 to write down.
Right. Yeah, it was amazing. Now, I asked the question of Alan, why did we do this? What was important to do this podcast?
Yeah, we'll talk about common themes later, but one thing that for us is we've had some pretty major career changes happen to us recently. And we both decided, we wanted to get into producing and hosting things.
Right.
But no one was breaking down the door to hire us. And so we had created a game show.
Right.
And I think we had a lot of fun in the process of creating a game show. Sorry, running out of breath. We had a lot of fun in the process of creating that game show, and it was just hard to get the ball rolling on it. And then we came up with, well, let's do a podcast. Well, everybody does a podcast. So we needed to come up with a concept and idea that was unique and something that we hadn't really heard. And you just kind of blurted out, what are the 5 things that change your life?
Right.
And you just blurted it out. I'm like, that's it. That's the one we're going with.
Right. Well, what was interesting is somebody has suggested, why don't you do a podcast where you maybe do 20 or 30 things that change your life, and each episode is just a different thing. And that's where it started. But I like interviewing people. I like having conversations and listening to other people. So that's why it became, instead of just me, it was let's ask other people. Mm-hmm. And you and I have known each other since 2001.
Yeah.
We did improv together. So we already have that mind of thinking outside the box. Like, how can we think of something different?
Yeah. And, we both come with our own strengths. And I see things differently than you see things. And it just kind of worked out to the final product.
Right. Now, why did I do this, though? There was more than just, because this, and I wanted to do something. But yeah, it was to start something big, to not know how it was going to turn out, but not worry about it. Not worry about how many people were going to listen to each episode. Instead, just put something out there that I can present that's there and available. To share something with the world and not worry about judgment of how it turned out.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I felt too. To create something that I could stand behind, to be proud of, to hopefully make something interesting to people, which is ultimately. I mean, you and I come from a very comedic background,
Right.
But this is not necessarily the most comedic podcast there is. I mean, it's very serious, but we had a great time pulling it together and doing it.
Right. So you and I have asked a lot of people to share their 5 things, but you and I have not offered really any of our own things.
I've noticed.
Yeah, it's been kind of quiet, huh? So
Because we didn't release that test episode for a while.
So, Alan, I'm going to spring one on you.
Okay.
I looked at your 5 things and decided that I wanted you to talk about one thing tonight.
Okay.
And that is this. You wrote, attended seminary school. The only education I actually paid for myself. It changed my life in that I learned the most about who I was as a person.
Yeah.
So talk about that.
Okay, well, I went to Talbot School of Theology, which is on the campus of Biola University over in La Mirada. In high school, I had become a Christian, and a very, very enthusiastic Christian. And when I went to college, I was there for my parents paid for my college degree, which I am grateful for, and. But I felt like there's a higher calling in my life, and at that time, I wanted to get into youth ministry. Christianity had changed my life so much as a youth. I wanted to share that and share that with other youth in my church. But what I found going to seminary was, I think with Liz's interview, this was my college degree. This is the one that I pursued and went for, and it meant a lot more to me. What I was learning, the classes I was taking, that was something that I wanted to learn more about. These were things that I found interesting, and then also there were a lot of classes you had to take, like counseling, things like that. And that's when I started really looking at my life and really kind of getting a hold of who I was. Why was I not happy with my life at that time, and how, what were the things that I needed to do to change? And so that was, I would say that seminary, if anything, was that kind of, I went there when I was 24, and that was the moment that I realized, okay, I'm finally an adult now. I'm making my decisions, I'm living on my own, and I'm learning and doing the things that I want to do.
And how did that turn out?
How did it turn out? Well, that's a whole other few more things that changed my life. I did go. I was in ministry for a while. I did college ministry in my hometown now of Yorba Linda now. And what I realized was I hate office politics, and even more so, I hate church politics. And the other thing was I'd gotten into comedy. As a Christian, you have a tendency to live in a bubble. All your friends are the people you go to church with. I was working at a Christian credit union, so that even made it worse. As much as I love my fellow Christians. I still am a Christian, but I began to venture out and meet people who weren't Christian, and as that happened, just long story short, my faith never changed, but my view of how I relate with the world changed. And through meeting people of various backgrounds, orientations, and so on, in 2008 was the Proposition 8 bill.
California bill.
Yeah, California bill that made same-sex marriage illegal.
Boo.
Yeah, and I was one of the few Christians I knew who basically came out and said, "I can't support this." And I at that point I began saying, "There's no reason why we as Christians should prevent same-sex couples from getting married. It kind of goes outside of what I believe Christ had called us to do." And what I found out was that I was very alone in that position. In fact, it was a very volatile position because a lot of my friends and peers were actively campaigning for the proposition, And but what that also helped me see is that there were some of my good friends who were kind of closeted supporters like me, and let's see, there was and then there were, I soon found out there were a lot of Christians who I'd grown up with, who were gay, and they finally found someone who could hear them and understand what they had gone through and what they are going through now.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting, though, you said the word, the bubble that we live in, and we have all different kinds of bubbles, whether it's a bubble of religion or a bubble of interests, a bubble of school. That's sometimes if we don't get out of those and explore, we're stuck.
Yeah, the world is kind of like that today. We live in a bubble of our culture. It took me a long time to, I was surrounded by Chinese because I'm Chinese. That's my relatives, my friends, my family's at that point. And we put ourselves in that little bubble. That's where I feel comfortable. I eat with chopsticks, that's the bubble we live in.
Right.
And we've got to, getting out of that bubble enriches us. It allows us to experience new things and meet new people and understand, see the world in a different way.
Interesting. Excellent. Thank you for sharing one thing.
All right.
So you tasked, you were going to give me one that I wrote on my list.
Okay, so the one you had that I found interesting was, it's funny because we talked on the podcast about a few of the ones that you've put here, but the one that I liked was, it must have come with an awkward smile why the phrase, "There's nothing else in the world I'd rather be doing," popped into my head in the middle of interviewing a guest in front of a lot of people. I feel like this is the origins of your hosting dreams.
So, you often hear people who say, at a young age, this is what they wanted to do. I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a doctor. And they were that and stayed that way. And I never really had that. And for many years, up until I met Christine, I always said I was floating from job to job and career to career. I was letting other people tell me how to run my life. And so, for a while I found improv, which was one of the things I actually mentioned was giving the best man speech at my brother's wedding when I got applause and laughter from the audience. And it wasn't just my mom saying, "You're so funny, Loren." It was other people. That was the beginning. That was the spark. And then from there it was, let's try improv. And then doing improv for so many years. And then discovering voiceover. Let's branch out a little bit more and let's try stand-up comedy. And then at some point I realized when I was doing stand-up comedy, the thing that I loved the most was when I went off book. Some drunk in the bar got me off my material. Because I hated writing and I could never get off book. I would stare at the piece of paper 50 times and say, what was the next thing I was supposed to talk about? But when somebody would interrupt, that was my proudest moment because I could riff like nobody else. I could just communicate and so I realized at some point that, I like hosting more than just being a comedian. Because I can be myself. I don't have to try to be somebody else. It's just, let's work on being Loren and understanding what that is. So fast forward to a couple years ago when I started interviewing animation voice actors because I was in the business and I made a lot of connections and friends. So I had an organization that helped me to fill a room of audience members while I'd interview like top tier animation voice actors. And I was interviewing this woman, Grey Delisle, who's in Scooby-Doo, and I think she's Wonder Woman on a new DC show. And she's talking, and I remember sitting there while she's talking, and just that phrase, "there's nothing else in the world I'd rather be doing," popped into my head. And then I thought about it. I said, I'm going to remember this, that I'm sitting here having a conversation with myself. I hope, great, keep on talking. And I figured I probably had this weird, awkward smile come across my face, but I knew, and I said, I'm going to let that happen. And it was really the culmination of everything that I loved so much. There was research in there. There was interviewing skills in there. You and I both are fans of Howard Stern.
Mm-hmm.
I love Howard Stern. One, yes, he does poopy jokes. That's great. I will always love poop and fart jokes. But also, he's a great interviewer. And especially over the last few years, he's become a great, insightful, emotional, passionate interviewer that asks questions of his guests. And he always finds something where a guest says, "How did you know that?" And I said, "I want to do that." So I, with Great Alile, with Tara Strong, I found something on the internet where they kept saying over and over again, "How did you know that?" Mm-hmm. And so I guess I had a lot of little smiles through those conversations. So that was, that was one thing that definitely changed my life.
Mm-hmm. Did you, I've had moments where it's like, oh, this is what I want to do. And did you dream for far down the line saying this is where I'm going to be? Or did you go, I'm going to follow this path and wherever it takes me, it's going to take me?
No, I'm going to follow this path and go wherever it takes me didn't come until recent. Before then, probably Christine could attest to it. There was lots of kicking and screaming and doubts and, oh my God, am I doing the right thing? Oh my gosh, am I doing the right thing? Being in my head a lot where I couldn't get out of it and worrying, yeah. Mm-hmm. Just worrying. And so it's been recently where it's been, let's try this.
Yeah. And then also, why does Ryan Seacrest have to do everything? Why can't he give other people a chance?
Right. I don't know. All
right. Well, that's yours.
So that's our... Cool. So, yes. So I have a question to the guests. Are there any of the 5 things, or anybody's from any podcast, anybody else's thing that you found really interesting, insightful, surprising? Or one of your own that you realized while you were talking about it on our show?
Well, here's something I actually thought of while we were doing the interview. This is kind of a left of center of what you just asked. And so after my episode came out yesterday, and one of my friends who I've been friends with since first grade, sent a little Facebook message, was like, "Hey, I thought I was your friend in 5th grade." And that spoke to exactly the thought I had when I was doing this interview of like, it would be amazing to have all of the friends you went through life with tell their narrative of what was happening to them at that time, and your involvement in the things that their brain remembered would be probably completely different. Mm-hmm. Like the things that I spoke to on the podcast, a lot of them were from like elementary school, junior high school. I would be surprised if any of my friends even registered any of those things that were so seminal to my development. They were having their own stuff that I probably, because as kids, you're so narcissistic. But I think it would be really fascinating, the stark differences in narratives that we each have, So that was really striking to me.
Was that one of the? Oh, I was gonna say, was that one of the friends you threw under the bus?
I wondered what your classmates thought of your little speech that you gave when you told them that I wanted to know what their reaction was.
Well, none of my really close friends were in that group.
Okay.
Because then I could have just said, well, we're at least going to do this together. So it was just, a bunch of classmatey kind of friends. And you
didn't get any looks afterwards?
I don't remember. Okay. All I remember, probably because I was like so scared and blacked out everything. I don't think there was any kind of like repercussion socially from it. I think they were probably like, well, that was weird, Yeah, but it's not something that has ever come up when I've talked to my friends afterwards. It's just something that I remember. For them, it was just another day.
What did your teacher say?
She was just like, okay. She was a really good teacher, and I think she understood what was going on. She didn't challenge me. She just gave us all zeros.
And this was just real quick. we want people to listen to the episode.
Oh.
But this was when you basically said you threw all your classmates under the bus because they all were waiting for you to do the group assignment.
Yeah, they wanted me to do all the work,
And you decided
said no.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So.
And I want to piggyback off the part where you talk about the narrative of what everybody else's experience is. My best friend, my childhood best friend, sent me a text after listening to it and said, "Thanks for the shout out." And I got nervous because I don't remember giving her a shout out. And I'm driving, texting and driving, and I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, "Oh, the part where you said that people would notice you and not me." She's the one that I spoke about in terms of when I started to realize how people viewed me, and she's a stand-up comic, and I would always go with her to the clubs because I wanted to get in for free. But one of the things that she said, I did. But one of the things that she said at that time was that she can always count on people remembering me and not her. And I didn't know if she took that as an insult, but she didn't. She's like, yeah, that's what it was at that time. And she said, until people then started to rely on me for my comedy. But at first, it didn't bother me because it was a win-win for both of us. So it was just, it was a little frightening at first to get that because I was wondering, what did I say?
Interesting. I listened back to all of these, and I wrote down some common threads. And there were 5 common threads amongst the 60 things that changed all of your lives. One of them was dating or marriage.
Apps came up a few times.
Yes, dating apps came up a few times, but also that kind of, defines the age of the person who is talking. Our one guest, Sammy, talked about dating apps. Satine talked about online dating apps.
As a millennial, I have to.
It's understandable. And I got to say, the night that we went to dinner, you and I and my wife, and we got to play around on your Tinder. Oh, that was the most fun.
You Tinder-pated. I'm happy to say that I am not on any dating apps anymore.
Okay.
I called it quits for now.
But
It just wasn't happening.
But now what are Rebecca and I going to do when we go to dinner? Because that was fun. Dimitri has been in a relationship for 4 years. And what was funny is matching ugly Christmas sweaters and cosplay outfits that he and his girlfriend of 4 years dress up as matching cosplayers as.
Yeah.
So I thought that was great. And then marriage. Liz talked about her husband and how they met. Todd talked about how he met his husband. Devin talked about how he met his wife. Kelly talked about how she met her husband in a band. So that was one of them.
Yeah, marriage tends to change your life.
It does. And dating does.
Dating
too.
does too, yeah.
It sometimes
And the ways
for the
you find
worse.
dates.
Yes, I know. So dating and marriage was one common thread. Moving was another common thread. Now, in Los Angeles, since this is an entertainment capital, a lot of people aren't from here. I find it personally fascinating because I am from here, and I get comments all the time like, "Oh," but to everybody else, it's not surprising. You're coming here, and so that's a different mindset when you have to decide, I'm going to pick up and leave from whatever small town I grew up in to come to Los Angeles. And so
I was going to say, I did a Groundlings audition, and I was one of 2 who were born in Southern California. And at least 3 people had just gotten off the bus and come to Groundlings to take the class.
that still happens. There's still the buses that stop,
Yep.
and then
Exactly.
and then Steve Martin gets off the bus and looks up and says, "Oh, this looks fancy."
Aspiring actors and actresses
Yeah.
still have no money.
It's a common thread. What was interesting was Kelly had talked about leaving California with her family to move to the Midwest and hated living on a farm and then eventually coming back. So another one was death. For those, we've all experienced death in one way or another. Some people that really affected them. And I found that that was a parent or a grandparent, and usually one that meant something to them. There was a reason why they were close with that person. Also, starting something. Everybody is starting something. And so I wrote down, here are the things that I wrote down. So Mary Forrest, she started her own PR marketing business. Alan, Dimitri, and Devin started improv troupes. I started a voiceover business group. Chris Gore started Film Threat magazine. Liz, you do college application writing. Tawana, Second City, and the Second City Directors Program. Christine, professional organizer, was one of the things. And Kelly did animal rescue. And so I found those to be, really kind of the five main similarities. Is anybody surprised by any of those, or does it make sense, or...
Well, it seems like those are the things that really are the turning points. Like Alan said, marriage and relationships are what tend to change people for better or for worse. But starting something, I think we all get to a point where it's time for a change. And then how do we become entrepreneurs or do our own thing? So it's not that surprising to me.
It's funny you say that too, because recently I've started sketch writing at UCB, and I got to a point where I was like, dang, Liz, you're starting another thing. Like, how many starts are we going to have? But then I read a really fascinating article yesterday, and I wish I remember the name of the principal, but the essential point was that there was a bus station in Finland or something where there are a bunch of stops, and you can either get on the bus and take that bus all the way to the end, or but what some people will do is they would get off one bus and decide, oh, you know what? I want to go to where the other bus is going. I want to see what the direction is. So to get off the bus, they'll go to that bus. So they just keep hopping from stop to stop instead of staying on the one bus and going all the way through. But the idea is it's not that starting so many things is wrong. It's that it's integrating everything you've learned along the way and reworking everything as you have all these starts and how they influence each other. So, and then it was an interesting visual because all the buses sort of had, when you stayed on the bus, you eventually you went through all these detours and got to the end, and it had colors from the other bus lines. So it was like it mixed up just because you stayed. I don't know if I'm making any sense. But the point is, when you start things and you integrate the past and all the things you've learned, it's not actually starting. You're just forming another strong connection and muscle along the way. You're building.
And it's almost like you start to see it as, oh, that's why I learned that thing at this job. I was there specifically to learn this thing so that now 5-10 years later, as I'm doing something else, I'm bringing that with me, that integration. It all serves the greater purpose or whatever you want to call it.
I find that even when I'm not doing acting, like even if I'm teaching or whatever, my improv experience, my acting experience, everything influences who I am as a teacher. And teaching influences how I am as an actor. Everything it's not isolated or insulated in any way. So that's always cool to remember.
With Satine, what I was intrigued with is you're transgender, but that isn't the thing that necessarily defines you. To me, I know you in different ways and different interests. And so, did you feel like you were approaching these 5 things differently?
No. I think I mean, it's just my gender is just it's just a gender identity. I mean, we all have one. So I don't think my 5 things were any different other than the experiences I might have had.
Right.
Like, I'm sure my online dating experience is a lot different than most people's. And I had to come out twice, once when I was gay and then trans, and kind of live my life that way. But I think I just chose things that were pivotal that I like, not necessarily, and they shaped who I am, but it's just things that everybody can relate to in some way also.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. I'm curious with anybody out in the audience if there are things, when you first heard about the title of this show, the 5 things, if it made you immediately think in your brain how this affected you, or if there were some things that changed your life?
Yes, it did immediately make me self-reflect in a way that's very emotional. I feel very emotional right now.
Because
in a good way.
Because you can kind of sympathize and understand, or
Yes, and just reflecting on my life. As Christine was talking about her friends, like I have a friend who we've been friends since we were 2, and all the things that we've been through together. And also how family will remember things differently. Mm-hmm. Me and my sister and brother, same parents, same household, but we will remember things slightly different. Like, oh no, that's not how it happened. It actually happened like this. Or, oh wow, I never thought that you felt that way when that was going on. And very emotional experiences that we've had as siblings. It's just a lot of reflection.
Yeah.
It's emotional in a good way. It feels very full.
And that's why I think this podcast is so special. This is Christine talking. Is that, other podcasts with interviews, you listen to it and you're like, oh, that's interesting. And sometimes you'll even hear something that you're like, oh, I'm going to remember that. Okay, good note. But this one, it's like, I can't imagine someone listening to even one episode and then not going to someone else in their life. So like, if you had to pick 5 things, my husband and I just had that big discussion last night, and it was really, we have been together, it's going to be like 26 years in October, and he was talking about some things, and we met as I was a freshman in college, and he was talking about some things in college that I was like, I didn't know you were thinking that then, like, oh my gosh. And so we had a really great discussion about that. And so that's what I love particularly about this podcast's content, is that it makes the listener get involved with this self-reflection and maybe asking other people. And it's something that kind of lives beyond just the experience of listening to an episode of a podcast.
Yeah, my husband had the same reaction. He was like, I didn't know all those things about you. I thought he knew those things just because
Right.
I lived them. And I assumed he was in my head.
And he can read your mind.
Obviously, I lived it. You should know it. But he was like, wow, and it was interesting how he related to me the next couple of days. It was like we were on a date or something. Like, tell me more. I was like, dude, I didn't. He just kept asking more questions about the things I mentioned.
yeah, even
That's
early.
interesting.
I was gonna say this is kind of the fine line we walked with producing the show was, we didn't necessarily want this to be a therapy session, but at the same time, maybe we do.
It was. I didn't find a lot of people who, once you said yes, you committed. So I didn't feel like there was a lot of pushback on talking about these. But you're right; they really are personal things, and I didn't think about it as more therapy than I thought.
Right. I mean, self-reflection is sometimes difficult because you don't always want to say, here are the 5 great things I've done in my life, but here are some of the 5 failures I've done in my life, or some of the 5 trials that I've experienced in my life. And a lot of times those negative things in our lives, we've just been bottling up. And sometimes we just need to talk about it, even if it's in a casual conversation like this. And that bringing it up can be quite therapeutic and quite character building.
Right.
I also think turning it into a story is part of that. It's part of the therapy or whatever you want to call it, because you're not just you're looking at it, you're reliving the experience, but it's a narrative now. It's like, these are 10 things that happened in my life, and at the same time it's sort of sequential, so you're looking at your life in general,
Right.
as this biography.
Yeah, it's your movie.
on the History Channel. and
Because
it's so
you
cool.
know how it's affected you for the better or worse. So
Yeah.
it's kind of been, there's been time. I called it social ancestry, where you're finding the near and wide commonality that ties us all together. Some things you can relate to very closely. That happened to me in that way. Some things are a little more distant, like, oh, okay, I kind of get that. And then some are you're just hearing somebody else tell a story But yeah.
Social ancestry, huh?
Yes.
next season, let's get DNA samples.
Social DNA samples? We're going to have to figure out what that is and how we market that.
I found myself actually coveting some experiences. Like when Christine talked about how she decided she was going to be her best friend and how she gave, I was like, wow, I wish my younger self could have had that kind of confidence or whatever. But at the same time, it was those are both vulnerable moments. So it was it was an interesting mix, but I couldn't fathom having that kind of brain, that mind at that age. So
Yeah.
I wanted her life.
Okay, so a question for all of the guests. Were there any items, because we asked you to write down 10 and then we discussed 5. Were there any of the 5 that we did not discuss that you were like, oh, I'm dying. Why didn't we talk about this one? And so you can take a look. You can take a look at that. I wanted to share one. What's interesting, what I thought my most, my most interesting thing. Alan, you picked something different. Yeah. So for me, what was a seminal moment for me was, and here's what I wrote. I'll tell you what you can learn, and when you can learn it, the words from an uninspiring boss and dead-end job that pushed me to finally find myself. To me, that was a big seminal moment because that was the end of, from when Red says, get busy living or get busy dying. That was the moment where a boss said that to me in the heat of an argument. And I said, you know what, it's time for me to take over my life. And then again, Christine, you're always in the picture. You helped me make, I always call it an escape plan. It was, how are we going to get you out of that job in 6 weeks, whether you quit or get fired? And boy, when you go back to a job on Monday, knowing that you've taken all of that stress off of you, I mean, you were saying, you're going to take Wednesday off and Thursday off and just call in sick, whatever. You're not working for them anymore. You're doing your best to complete what you need to complete. That was great. I did get fired before I quit. But that was another beautiful moment. So
Congratulations.
You got unemployment though, right?
I got unemployment, yeah.
You got fired.
Yeah.
Strategy, yes.
Win-win.
So, just guessed you've had a moment to look. Did any of you have one that we didn't discuss that you? We don't have to discuss it now, but just we can quickly just talk about it and why that was something that means more to you than what Alan and I thought meant to us.
Well, I mentioned RuPaul's Drag Race.
Uh-huh.
And we didn't talk about that. And
RuPaul's Drag Race.
I do love RuPaul's Drag Race, but I think more or less I love RuPaul. And I love RuPaul from the 90s and the albums. And I mean, it's just become like this huge monster of Drag Race, which is kind of, it's not so much about Ru anymore. It's about the other queens that she brings in. But I've always had this fascination with RuPaul because she's pretty much the reason I am who I am today, because RuPaul was my first kind of glimpse at a different way to express myself. And I remember I was in college in 2000-something. And that was back when Napster. Remember Napster? Napster was a thing. And
yes.
Yeah. And so I was downloading dance music because that was the thing. And one of my roommates was from Cyprus, and she brought all the cool Euro dance mixes. I was like, oh, I'm going to find some dance stuff too. And RuPaul showed up, and I was like, I recognize this name, but I don't know why. And I did some research, and sure enough, slowly I was just kind of enthralled by everything that RuPaul did. And then it basically just helped me shape who I was back then to who I became now. I mean, I'd say that was the pinnacle start point.
And what we talked about before, how would Alan and I have known that was a bigger moment for you than the 5 that we picked? So
yeah, you wouldn't have.
We wouldn't
unless you asked.
That's why you put little stars and circles and arrows between on your list.
I would like to discuss something, Christine. When you sent the list, you put it in pretty much chronological order.
Yes.
And you, I mean, more than focusing on your childhood, you did put it in chronological order, but you did teach me something about what that means to you, that it's not a bad thing. I mean, we laugh and joke, but that's just something that defines you. That's the way your brain is wired. So,
well, I'm like Satine's soul sister. It's like, oh, you want the 150 things that were pivotal moments in my life? I got them. Like, no problem. I have that list. And so when I was doing this, of course, I'm an organizer, so you start at the beginning. And, I was like, oh, there's a lot of stuff just in the childhood. And that's kind of interesting because I've done interviews about my business and my career. And I'm like, ugh, I'm tired of talking about that necessarily, especially when I have an opportunity to share stuff that nobody else would even know about. And it was much more personal, this interview, which is why it was very fun for me to do. So when I was making my list, I'm like, well, I don't need to go on. This is fertile ground right here. And so I just kind of stopped. I think there was like one or two. Well, the power group thing was after college, but I pretty much stopped at college.
Yeah, after your interview, I remember one is, not only did you put in chronological order, but it pretty much ended at high school. And it felt like after our discussion was, okay, that's volume 1. There's got to be much
of
more.
15.
Where's Breakfast Club Part 2? Alan, so I picked one of your most interesting things. Would that have been the one that you would have picked, or from your list of 5?
Oh gosh, that's why I had you pick, because they were like, oh, I could talk about any of these. The one, like, we were going to talk about, what were some of the things that resonated with other, with the other guests, and one was Tawana's, where it was. She said basically recognizing how people view me. I'm an introvert. Very very. It's what I am, and I guess, and I'm like really an introvert, and it was at one point in my midlife that I realized that's who I am. And it's not wrong to be an introvert. It's not bad to be an introvert. I'm just not very good at being an extrovert, and then realizing, wow, I'm very comfortable being an introvert. I'm very comfortable not going to parties. And, there's those awkward moments when I'm with someone one-on-one and I have nothing to say. That's probably the only downside that I have for being an introvert.
So was this show difficult for you?
No, because it's kind of funny, because when my wife goes, you perform improv. You've been performing improv for over 20 years. How are you an introvert? And it's like, being on stage is one thing. Being on stage is that moment where I can let loose and let go and be not the introvert, because whatever I do goes to the audience, and that's my little gift to them. And then when the show's over, it's over. The worst part of my show is the fact that I have to go outside and high five everybody who just saw the show. Praying, don't talk to me, don't talk to me.
Do any of the guests feel that way when you're on stage or on camera?
I'm completely with you. I'm also an introvert, and I was thinking, I'm like, people would probably say, Tawana, you're an introvert? Because I'm very bubbly around big groups, but then it's that one-on-one moment where it starts to get awkward. And I'm the same way. If it's at the end of a show, I tend to either try to dart out the door before people come out, or I stay in the back until people leave. And I'm known to do this thing where I got busted on or called out on it years ago. But like, say for instance, okay, tonight, here we all are. I may slip out and you may not know that I've left. So I'm just really good, because it's just too awkward for me to have this conversation of, now it's time to say goodbye. And so, yeah, I totally get what you mean.
Yeah.
About being
like at parties, not only do people think, did Alan leave, but people also think, was Alan even there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a total introvert as well. I will bump into you slipping out the door of any event. It's like, I'll just leave.
And
yeah,
so,
and there's and just to explain a little more, sometimes as an introvert you come off as kind of as not a nice person,
Right.
And there was a time where I just really worried about people and how they thought about me and not being nice. And I realized, well, they just don't know me. So I'll just rely on the people who actually know me.
Yeah, and I guess it is for those people who are on camera. That's what the audience who's watching the show or the movie or whatever on stage, they think that's your character. And so there is a difference between the person on stage and the person on the microphone or in front of the camera. And I even think about that. I just finally realized who I am as a person and all my fallacies and weird uniqueness. So I'm now pretty comfortable with myself. But the idea of going on camera to be somebody else scares the crap out of me. So I'm like, how do you do that? But for some people, being somebody else is a lot easier than being themselves.
And I think the trick with introverts is that if you have a role, and I'm not talking about a role on camera, but like you are the producer of the show. So you have a purpose and a thing, and you know that you can talk to people because you're the producer. And I think that when you have a function and a role, it's easier to then do that, even with abandon.
Yeah.
But
Here's the reason I'm talking to you.
Yes. But then it's like, okay, hey, now there's no rules and it's just us. I'll just go over here because I don't know.
I wanted to share some of the things that resonated with me the most over the course of these 12 episodes. So I just wrote 6. So Casey and Kelly both talked about animal communication, which I found interesting because we've had animal communicators talk to our cats, talk to us. It's all weird, but it's still fascinating. Devin talked about the golden age of radio and TV, and I grew up loving the golden age of radio and TV. Liz, you talked about self-inflicted nearsightedness, and that's got to be one of my favorite things out of all 60. The fact that you would wear glasses when you didn't need them, and it screwed up your eyes forever.
Yeah, I make my daughter listen to that one all the time.
It's a morality tale now.
Tawana, when you talked about getting fired from a job you no longer enjoyed, of course, because I felt that because of the job that I had. And so in that social ancestry, that was very close to me. And Todd talked about the fear of missing out, of always wanting and you know, that's your friends always feeling like you're not part of the gang. And Christine, that was a similar theme in your life and my life where sometimes we were playing pretend by ourselves. And so
That's a downside of being an introvert. Why are they not calling me?
Right. So Alan, did you have any that you
Well, I mean, that one was definitely one, I talked about the one from Tawana.
Right. I know that with Dimitri, who we know from improv and also is a big geek, I know that interests you a lot because you have a lot of commonality in Comic-Con.
Yeah, Dimitri, Satine, and Chris. We have kind of a geek background.
Right. So I find it personally, maybe I'm an introvert where I like to hear other people talk. I don't feel like I have enough to say about a topic, that I'm never smart enough to be the lead and say, let me tell you about Star Wars. So I feel more comfortable listening to Satine talk about the excitement of geekdom, or Alan. Even though if I don't know what you're talking about, I still feel like I'm part of the group, and I will just sit there quietly, introverted, listening and excited. Yeah. I don't know if that's just me or not.
Well, that's probably where you get all of your, I call them Loren fun facts.
Yes.
Yeah, you're the one that you had that I'm jealous of is you appearing on Robot Chicken.
Yes.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
That was one of the things I think probably that I didn't say, but it was funny. I had a goal as a voice actor to be a voice on Robot Chicken. And I asked the universe, I said, dear universe, I want to be on Robot Chicken. And the universe granted that wish.
But you weren't specific about it.
I wasn't specific enough.
So what happened?
I won a raffle to have my likeness done in a Robot Chicken puppet done in my likeness, and then it aired on 2 episodes of the show. And then I got to keep it afterwards. So I have a figurine of me that was on the show when I really wanted to be a voice on the show. So,
Well, even better,
It's very literal.
so yeah.
and even better, you got to make love to Catwoman, I believe.
In the episode, yes. There was something about a litter box and Catwoman. It was accurate.
Well, yeah, when I was listening to yours, it started making me think. And so that like cracked me open a little bit too. So it's interesting, just the more you listen to different people, there's going to be something that just kind of breaks you open a little bit and you hear something. So I thought about my childhood friend, Tanea, that I've known since she was 3 and I was 5. And my mom was like her mom and her mom was like my mom, and we grew up together. And sometime after high school, things drifted apart and we weren't in touch anymore. And then what happened was her mother ended up having something, she collapsed at work and she was on life support, she was in a coma. And, Tanea had called us and it all kind of brought us back together. And her mom ended up dying. And it was just like this, moment where she basically became part of our family again. And she's my sister. I have her babies are my nieces and nephews, and I'm a godmother to one of them as well. And so, it was just a strange thing that, in her mother's absence in that moment when she was actually leaving all of us, she brought us together as well. And our friendship grew from there, and just, we came back to that sisterhood, that we have. We're closer even than my own sister and I, even though I love my sister. Hi, Christina. But, we just share a very special bond. We've known each other for so long, and we've been through so much together. So, it made me think about that.
Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? Or you can think about it if you don't have to, or it's okay.
Yeah, when I heard the title, it actually occurred. It didn't occur to me. It just made me think, I do that all the time. I literally think about these things all the time because I'm very self-reflective when it comes to how did I get here with these moments. And I literally, it's almost like a connect the dots kind of a thing. I am here because this person said this. And then I got there because this decision happened. And I go back and it's not a game, but just self-reflection constantly that I think about. So like you two, I literally, just sitting here hearing everyone talk about their stories and their events and their connections, I'm coming up with things that I haven't even thought of. Oh yeah, that's another one. Oh yeah, my childhood. Oh yeah, that's a good one. I literally, just sitting here, I've easily thought of 10. And if I continue going, I will literally, like you guys said, 150 easy. It'll just keep coming. But I do. I think about these things all the time, and it's usually connected with people. Like how a person introduced either an idea or helped me with a decision in my life, and how it literally, if I can't even say a fork in the road. Yes, absolutely. So it's not even a fork, but if I'm at a point, and I have been, my life has been such a meandering stream of just constant change that it's not a fork. It's more
like a tree of ancestors.
Absolutely. It literally, I have 10 ways to go, and there are these really specific points. And I almost freak people out because I go back and I show so much appreciation for these moments that these people have actually changed my life in such an overwhelming way. The most impactful thing recently is my neighbor. I was sitting down, I was having such a down day, and I was at my back door I was at a bungalow in Venice, and my back door actually ran along a sidewalk that was right next to the canals. So it was a heavily traveled sidewalk, and I was so sad, and I was just so depressed, and I was just kind of sitting there not really looking up, and my neighbor walked by and said, "Hey, are you okay?" And I just started chatting a little bit, and tears probably started to come down. And he said, and I was talking just very generally about what was going on. I was having health issues. And he said, a friend of mine saw this Chinese, doctor. His name is Dr. Mao. I said, I'll probably give him a call and probably find him. And I tracked him down. This Dr. Mao saved my life. Like, literally saved. And I was going back to this neighbor going, you are the person that saved you are the person that connected me with this doctor.
You never know.
And literally, and I never would have found this doctor, not in a million years, if this person had not said this. So, and I have so much appreciation that it's difficult. I almost freak people out because they're like, "Yeah, okay, it's fine."
That goes back to the bubbles. When we live in this bubble, if it's a bubble of one, we're not talking anybody. That's serious.
Yeah.
When it's a little bit bigger bubble and there's a small group of people, you learn about them really quick. But when you expand your bubble and go outside your comfort zone, you have these moments where you meet somebody that changed your life or something.
Or someone goes into your bubble. Yeah. Because he could have just walked by. He had some kind of inspired thought to just say something in that moment.
He stopped. Yeah. I wasn't even making any contact. And I just think, what if he wouldn't have stopped that day? I never would have found this doctor that is the one doctor in this country that could help me.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Really amazing.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So, Alan, you and I kind of were focused on let's get season 1 out, and I wanted to make it special. I didn't want to do just an ongoing weekly, because weekly interviews you can rely on podcasts. You're going to hear it every week. There'll be a new guest. This one I wanted to make it special, like 12 people, like a season. But what do you think about a second season? Have we covered everything? I mean, we talked about common threads. Are there any more to explore?
I know there's a lot more that we can do with this. I mean, in terms of I feel like a lot of our guests are from the entertainment industry.
Right.
Are involved in it.
I think if you go outside of the entertainment industry and start tapping into people who are not a part of this, you're going to
I mean, that's one thing that we talked about, like experts in certain fields.
I would also really encourage you guys to explore age, because I think it'd be fascinating to hear the 5 things that someone picks who's in their 60s or 70s.
Right.
Or a 3-year-old.
No, but also... That's true. No, but also, like, how does an 18-year-old interpret this question? Yeah. And how do they... What is their perspective so far on their, existence?
Yeah, and that was an interesting one, because Dimitri, I think, was our youngest. And part of me was like, oh, he's so young. Is he going to have something interesting? And he did. But it'd be interesting to hear what he would say 20 years from now.
Right.
I think all of my topics were topics of an 18-year-old, so.
That's probably true.
Geek for life.
For maturity level.
Well, cool. Well, I hope we get to explore. And Kelly was the one person who was truly not in the entertainment business. She's the one that started an animal shelter, who grew up listening to music from the 60s, 70s, joined a band. So that was kind of a taste. And I definitely look forward to interviewing. And I think what's great about this show is you can interview people who are well-known, and you can interview people who are not well-known, don't want to be well-known, who have just as interesting of a story or stories to tell. Even when they don't think so. And I've had a couple people who have declined because they don't think they've done anything interesting in their lives. So we're going to work on them first. So, wow, with that, Alan, I think we're going to wrap up the recap show. I hope everybody had fun and nobody ran out of the room crying or laughing
Yet.
or yet.
We still have 2 minutes. It can still happen.
I know. But anyway, Alan, as always, thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. This has been a fun journey, fun experience.
It has. Satine, thank you.
Thank you.
Tawana, thank you.
Thank you.
Liz, thank you.
Thank you.
Christine, thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome.
And
Guest number 1, thank you. Guest number 2, thank you.
that's what you're getting in credits. Guest number 3. I want to thank our audio engineer, Tony Azzolino. Thank you very much.
Hey, Tony.
And I want to thank our assistant, Jeffrey Marks. Thank you very much for hanging out. So this is the end of season 1. Look forward to season 2.
Yes.
Coming whenever we decide to do it. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
My thanks, as always, to my producer, Alan Ing. Audio engineer was Tony Azzolino. Production assistance by Jeffrey Marks. You can follow us online at fivethingspodcast.com or on Facebook at facebook.com/fivethingspodcast. That's FIVE. Or on Twitter at 5thingspod. That's FIVEPOD. Music by My Monthly Date. Subscribe to 5 Things That Changed Your Life on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast service. And yes, we will be back with a season 2 coming soon. For 5 Things That Changed Your Life, I'm Loren Kling.